Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Joe DIY once said he wanted to be the big bad wolf, not just another sheep in the herd. And he was right. That's exactly how I feel now. I'm angry, not at the world, but at myself for letting things get to this point. I've become just another face in the crowd, and I know exactly what went wrong. The realization came too late. Now I see it clearly. I was drained, worn out, taken for granted, call it what you want. But it's not about the money. It's about my life. I'm a good person. I've always played by the rules, did everything I was supposed to. I graduated from school, was a member of the forestry club, became a Boy Scout, and later joined the National Guard. I used the benefits from that to pay for college, where I studied forestry. Then I went to graduate school and eventually got a job with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources in the Forestry Division, right in my home county. I also worked part-time as a forestry instructor at a local college. And yes, I got married. My name is Francis Campbell, if that matters. I'm of lean build, with brown hair, brown eyes, clear skin, and what I always believed was strong determination. But I'm not a young man anymore. I'm 45 years old. I've been married for 22 years. We have 2 teenage children, a house, or at least something like a house on a small farm, 2 pickup trucks, and a Jeep. Until recently, I thought we had a good life. But that illusion has started to crack. And it's not all my fault. The truth is, the real issue is my wife. My father used to say, half-jokingly, that God made 2 things to test a man's patience, women and cars. Well, I can fix a car. But when it comes to understanding a woman, that's a different story. Leslie, my wife, wasn't always a source of frustration. She was once the love of my life. You've probably heard a story like this before, maybe too many times. But here's mine. Leslie was smart, beautiful, with long brown hair, striking blue eyes, and a good figure. She was actually an inch taller than me. She's 5 feet 9 inches, and I'm 5 feet 8 inches. I grew up in the western part of Maryland. She's from the city. And by that, I mean Baltimore. Leslie studied English literature at a college near Baltimore, then managed to find a job out west. Yes, we consider it the West, out here. Our biggest city is Oakland. If you don't believe me, feel free to look it up. We met not long after she moved. It happened at one of the autumn festivals. I was already working by then and was assigned to a booth where I explained aspects of forest life. I had a glass terrarium with a rattlesnake, some bobcat photos, and a few other things to catch tourist attention. That's when I saw her new in town, wearing a bright lavender blouse and a very strong, expensive perfume. Not the best idea in the mountains in October. Worker wasps had already stopped building their nests, and the queen wasps were flying around, looking for food. Bright colors, strong scents, hamburger scraps, and open cans of soda attract them like magnets. She picked up an open soda without checking, and sure enough, one of those yellow and black insects stung her, right on the upper lip. It swelled up instantly. Fortunately, I was nearby. I gave her an antihistamine, applied some ointment, probably not very effective, and tried to help as much as I could. She wasn't happy, who would be? But I did my best. And somehow, despite that painful first meeting, things started to click between us. She had come to the festival with some fellow teachers. They had all arrived in one car, but Leslie had taken the bus. At the time, I had a Jeep. So, I left my booth under the care of my colleague and drove this beautiful young woman, Leslie, back to her apartment. I got her phone number and arranged a date for the following week. There were quite a few other guys interested, but I guess I stood out. By the following spring, we were married. 2 years later, our son Richard was born, and just a year after that, our daughter Victoria came into the world. Leslie left her job and embraced motherhood wholeheartedly. For the next 18 years, it felt like a fairy tale. Life was good, really good. And then came the change. I didn't change much, just a little more gray at the temples. I stayed in shape, kept up my weight and energy. Leslie also looked great. Honestly, she looked even better in some ways. Motherhood had added a bit to her figure, but it suited her. She still turned heads when we were out shopping. I used to watch other men sneak glances at her as she walked through the aisles. She had this confident way of walking, like she knew exactly who she was. It gave me a strange sense of pride. She was my wife, mine, and others could only admire from afar. Our relationship was passionate, supportive, and strong. For 20 years, she made me feel wanted, seen, and appreciated. And I did the same for her. That's why it was so shocking when things began to change, not all at once, but gradually. these things never happen overnight. It's not like everything is perfect on Monday, and then by Tuesday, something feels completely off. I thought we were fine. I thought she was happy. I believed we would always be the way we had been. But there's often a moment, something small, that sets off that first feeling of unease. Like a sudden shift in the air. You can't see it, but you know something's wrong. That's what happened to me. Since Leslie didn't work for most of our marriage, I handled our day-to-day finances. I managed our budget, monitored our accounts, nothing too complicated. Mortgage payments, credit card bills, savings, fuel expenses, it was all routine. We didn't have a separate card for fuel, so everything went on the main Visa account. I usually refueled once a week, mostly for work. I had a company truck during the day, so my personal fuel expenses were minimal. When Victoria got older, Leslie decided to take a part-time job at the local library. A couple of evenings a week, maybe a few mornings here and there, just helping out at the front desk, checking books in and out. I didn't think much of it at first, but then I noticed something odd. Our fuel expenses started climbing. A lot. Now, the library was only about 4 miles away. Even if she drove there 3 times a week, it didn't explain the sudden jump in gas costs. We were spending an extra $70 a month on fuel, and that didn't make sense. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. But the numbers didn't lie. I know we don't live in a perfect world. Not every couple stays faithful. There's that old Alan Jackson song. I forget the exact lyrics, but it goes something like, "Who's cheating who? Who's being honest? Who's giving up? And who's staying loyal?" It stuck in my head. I wasn't accusing Leslie of anything. I just had questions. But I didn't want to confront her without proof. I didn't want to pry through her phone or search her things. That felt wrong. What if I was just being paranoid? What if I hurt her by doubting her? Still, I couldn't ignore my instincts. So, I did something I thought was harmless. I bought a second GPS tracker and quietly installed it in the trunk of Leslie's car, near the spare tire. I didn't feel good about it, but I wasn't trying to be controlling. I wasn't spying. I just needed to know the truth. I needed to understand where all the extra gasoline was going. So, I checked, and what I found surprised me. Nearly every day, the car was being driven to Martinsburg. Apparently, Leslie would drop Victoria off at school, then head to Martinsburg for a few hours. Our son Richard already had his own car, but Victoria, because of her early schedule, still had to take the school bus. That raised a question. What was Leslie doing in Martinsburg so often? Sure, we had a few friends there, but visiting them once or twice a week would have made sense, not nearly every day. It wasn't just the gas or the trips. Other odd things started to surface. Now, I'm not a suspicious person by nature, but over time, all these little things began adding up. We live in a log house. Winters here mean chopping, splitting, and stacking firewood. I've always done that part. All Leslie usually had to do was bring a few logs inside now and then, and maybe cover the firewood pile with a tarp if rain or wind was expected. That's about a 15-foot walk from the porch. Nothing too demanding. So I never really gave it much thought. But it wasn't just the firewood. That was just one tiny detail, insignificant on its own. Leslie used to handle a lot around the house. She would make the beds, run the dishwasher, clean the sink, vacuum from time to time, keep the coffee pot going, feed the dogs, and let the cats in and out. These weren't massive tasks, and we all pitched in. But recently, I found myself doing almost everything. Little by little, she had stopped. And then there were the missed calls. Leslie had a cell phone. For years, she always answered when I called. Now, almost every call went straight to voicemail. Another thing that began to hurt was dinner. Leslie had always been an excellent cook. She took real pride in preparing meals. Of course, we had takeout sometimes, pizza or store-bought lasagna, but more often than not, dinner meant steak, fish, spaghetti, homemade casseroles, roast dinners, or even wild game like venison or rabbit. But those days had started to fade. I was heating up frozen meals in the microwave more and more often because Leslie wasn't home, and I didn't know where she was. There was one memory that stuck with me, something that hit harder than anything else. When Victoria was 13, she and Leslie were in a terrible car accident. A driver under the influence ran a red light and hit them. It wasn't Leslie's fault. Victoria was badly injured. Her legs were broken, and the recovery was long. We spent months getting her to surgeries, rehab, and checkups. She lost a year of school but eventually caught up. She worked hard and joined school clubs. She was determined to bounce back. Naturally, someone had to pick her up from those after-school activities. We took turns, Leslie, Richard, or me. But in the past month, something deeply upsetting happened twice. Leslie simply didn't show up to pick up Victoria. The second time, Victoria stood outside in the light rain waiting. Eventually, she called me, and I rushed to get her. Both times, Leslie couldn't explain why she hadn't come. It didn't make me angry. It broke my heart. Victoria is kind, trusting, and gentle, a sweet, innocent girl. That day, she looked like a puppy that had been left behind, forgotten. After the second time, I sat down with her to talk. It didn't go as I expected. Victoria burst into tears and said, "Oh, Dad, you're so thick-skinned." I was stunned. I asked her what she meant. She said, "Ask Richard." So I did. Richard didn't give a direct answer. He just said, "Just start paying attention to Mom's new things." I hadn't noticed anything before. But after that, I started watching more closely. Of course, I knew Leslie had taken a part-time job at the library. It made sense that she would want to dress neatly and professionally. But this felt different. Her clothing had changed. A lot. Her skirts had become much shorter, mid-thigh length, which she never used to wear. They were also tighter. Her new blouses. One day she left the house with the top buttoned up nearly to her neck. But when I stopped by the library later that day, the top 3 buttons were undone. There was also a new push-up bra I didn't recognize. Leslie has always had thick, beautiful brown hair, but now she was styling it differently and wearing large gold hoop earrings. And then there were the shoes. 3-inch heels. Stylish, yes, but not at all the type of shoes she used to wear for library work. The women working at the library, as far as I could tell, usually wore comfortable sneakers or simple ballet flats. So who was Leslie trying to impress? At that moment, I realized it was time to take a closer look. Fortunately, my job gave me a flexible schedule, and I had enough vacation days saved up. Taking a few days off here, and there wasn't going to be a problem. It was winter, a slow season. The hunters were gone, canoeing hadn't started yet, and the parks were closed. I decided to investigate Leslie's schedule and those frequent trips. At first, nothing seemed unusual. But on my third free day, a Thursday, everything began to make sense. Rather than drive around Martinsburg or follow her through town, I parked in a discreet spot near our house. We live on a small farm, but the house is close to the road. Across from us are only 2 other homes, a rundown wooden rental and an old Victorian house owned by a widow named Vinica Hastings. I've known Vinica for many years. She's a kind woman, about 3 years younger than me. Her husband had been a great guy. He worked in contracting, but he passed away from Hodgkin's disease. I don't know all the medical details, but I understand it affects the lymphatic system and can be very aggressive. He had been unwell for a while, then suddenly deteriorated and died within a few months. Vinica was left with very little besides insurance. She now works various shifts at the local diner to make ends meet. That Thursday, I was sitting quietly, listening to the radio and trying not to laugh too hard at the morning show jokes, when I saw a black Lexus pulling out of our driveway. Something didn't add up. It appeared that the man had parked in our backyard to avoid being seen from the road. I didn't have time to take a photo, but I clearly remembered the car. It had Virginia license plates. That might not mean anything on its own. Maybe it was a rental. But my instincts told me something was wrong. I was tired of playing detective, but I believed I had the right to understand what was happening in my own home. I started up my Jeep, drove around to the back of the house, parked, and slammed the door loudly. I climbed the steps to the porch and entered through the rear door. The house was silent, too silent. The air felt heavy. I called out, "Leslie, I'm home." Whose car was that? I heard some movement, and then I saw Leslie sitting on the couch in the living room. She looked surprised, maybe a little embarrassed, possibly even irritated. Her expression carried a hint of guilt. She was wearing a sea green blouse with the top 3 buttons undone. Her dark brown pants fit her perfectly, and her hair was pulled up into an elegant updo, though it looked slightly messy. Her makeup seemed a bit smudged. It was obvious this outfit had been put on only minutes earlier. Our home is a log cabin, and the entire lower floor is an open space. The kitchen, living room, and dining area are all connected. I walked into the kitchen, took a glass, and poured myself some water. Then I turned to her and asked, "What did you do with the dogs?" We had 2, a Labrador Retriever and a Beagle, both bred for hunting. I've always loved hunting. After drinking my water, a thought crossed my mind. Maybe someone else had been hunting here, metaphorically speaking, behind my back. Leslie got up, walked to the back door, glanced outside, and replied, "They're out back." Then she turned to me and asked, "You're home early?" "I was nearby and thought I'd stop in," I said. "Aren't you supposed to be at the library?" I asked casually. She seemed to regain her composure remarkably quickly, but then again, that was just how Leslie was. Calm under pressure. She said, "I was just about to leave when a man pulled up. He said he worked for an energy company, something about oil or hydraulic fracturing. He was lost and came in to ask for directions." That explanation didn't sit right with me. I managed a smile and said, "Interesting." I placed the glass in the sink, walked over, and kissed her lightly on the cheek. "Well, I hope you have a good day. Don't forget to pick up Victoria." And with that, I left, not waiting for a response. I left the same way I'd come. I petted the dogs in the backyard, got into my Jeep, and drove off, but not far. I simply crossed the street and stopped in front of Vinika's house. I sat in the car for a moment, thinking. First, I had to admit something to myself. I truly and deeply loved my wife. I was willing to do anything for her. We had been together for more than 20 years, and she had given me 2 wonderful children. Throughout our marriage, she had never given me any reason to question her loyalty until recently. Or rather, until today. Up to that point, I would have sworn that the idea of her being unfaithful had never even crossed her mind. She was a genuinely good person, beautiful, kind to my parents and our children, respected in the community. She sang in the church choir, taught Sunday school for years, and was always loving and affectionate at home. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe the man really had just stopped by for directions. Could that be the truth? Or was I just fooling myself? I got out of the car and noticed Vinika's old Chevrolet Blazer parked in the driveway. I walked up to the porch and knocked on the door. The porch was in poor shape, loose, rotting boards, chipped paint, and a screen door with several holes. Vinika was a sweet woman, pretty in a quiet, modest way. She had soft brown eyes, a petite frame, and a voice that always sounded a little squeaky. As I mentioned before, she had married a kind man. They had a young daughter together, a little girl named Tammy, who was around 6 years old now. Not long ago, I had seen Vinika slipping shyly into the local thrift store. I felt a twinge of sympathy. She was younger than me. She had been in 9th grade when I graduated high school. I remembered how my parents used to urge me to ask her to dance at school events. I did it just to please them. After a few moments, she opened the door. It looked like she had just woken up, and she instinctively raised her hands to cover her chest. "Oh, Francis, come in," she said softly, opening the door wider. I stepped inside. I had been in this house before, back when her parents were still alive, and again on the day of her husband's funeral. But since then, I hadn't visited much. The living room was dimly lit, and it was clear that things had been difficult for her. Vinika stepped back. "Give me your hat and coat. Sit down. I'll make some coffee. You still like it with milk, but no sugar, right?" I raised my hands. No need to go to any trouble. I just came by for a minute. But she was already heading to the kitchen. She was one of those small, delicate, slightly anxious women who reminded me of birds. To be honest, I'd always preferred women with a stronger presence, like Leslie. I had never been drawn to someone like Vinika. "It'll only take a minute," she called from the kitchen. "Please, sit down." I sighed. "All right, but I won't stay long." I sat down uneasily, listening to her move around in the kitchen. A few minutes later, she returned with a small tray carrying 2 cups of coffee and a little container of cream. She placed it on the old, scratched coffee table. "Francis, I'm so glad to see you," she said gently. I took a cup and poured in some cream. The cup was chipped, and the handle had broken off. I felt a pang of guilt. I lived just across the street and had barely checked in. "I don't have much time," I said, "but I wanted to ask you something. Maybe you can help." She sat down on a wooden stool, perching on the edge as if she were being questioned. It made me a little uncomfortable. "Of course," she said. "Whatever you need." I took a breath. "Have you noticed anything unusual at our house? Anything strange?" She fidgeted. She had always been a little nervous. "No, nothing," she said quickly. "Are you worried about the kids?" "No, not exactly," I replied. "I mean, have you seen any unfamiliar cars? Anything unusual involving my wife?" She set her cup down, wiped her mouth with her hand, and rested her palms on her knees. She looked very thin, and she wouldn't meet my eyes. "No, nothing like that," she said again. But I could tell she wasn't telling the truth. I added, "It's okay. I'm not asking you to spy or anything. But if you ever see something that seems off, I'd appreciate it if you let me know." Vinika looked up at me with her wide brown eyes, so large they seemed almost too big for her face. For a moment, she said nothing. "I wouldn't," she began, but her voice trailed off. "I wouldn't snoop," she said quietly, "but if I see something that seems dangerous, I'll let you know." I nodded and took another sip of coffee, then stood up and walked toward the door. She followed me. At the door, I turned around, and she was so close that she had to take a step back to avoid bumping into me. Even someone with a frame as slim as mine could have accidentally knocked her over in such a tight space. I smiled. I'd really appreciate it. She looked so fragile and uncertain that I couldn't help myself. I reached out and gently touched her cheek. She lowered her face slightly into my hand, just for a moment, and then stepped away. "If I see anything, I'll tell you," she repeated, blushing. She was so small, wearing an old, wrinkled blouse and a pair of worn sweatpants. Her thin frame was hard to ignore. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and she looked like someone who had simply stopped trying out of fatigue, not carelessness. In that moment, something stirred in me, and I felt unexpectedly uneasy. I quickly put on my hat, nodded politely, and left the house. As I walked back to my Jeep, I glanced at her old Blazer parked in the driveway and thought, that thing really needs repairs. Then I caught myself, was I thinking about her car or about Vinica herself? That unsettled me even more. I drove off, realizing I needed to take my mind off everything to relieve the stress that was building up. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work and started searching online for any information I could find about a black Lexus with the partial license plate I had memorized. I managed to organize my workload and make space in my schedule, but I didn't uncover anything useful about the car. Eventually, I realized it was time to take a more serious look at what my wife was doing. Gathering the information I needed was surprisingly easy. Leslie left the following Tuesday. She said she was heading to West Virginia. Something about it did not sit right with me. Earlier, I had discreetly placed a GPS tracker in her vehicle. Using it now, I followed her digital trail and discovered she had stopped at a Motel 6 just outside Martinsburg. That confirmed my suspicions. I decided I would need another day off. I took Friday. That Friday, I was in Martinsburg at the same Motel 6, around the same time she had visited earlier in the week. I had seen plenty of detective shows and crime series over the years, so I had a rough idea of how to handle myself. I walked into the lobby, approached the front desk, placed a $10 bill on the counter, and showed the receptionist a photo of Leslie. "Have you seen her here before?" The receptionist chuckled. "Not for $10. I added 20 more. It was getting expensive." He nodded. "Yeah, she comes here sometimes. Always with a friend." I asked carefully, "With a man?" He raised an eyebrow and gave me a knowing look. I added another 10. "They come about once a week, sometimes more. They take a room, stay a few hours, and leave." "What room?" I asked. He hesitated. I leaned in. "That's enough." He smirked. "Are you the husband?" I smiled back, tight, controlled. "Let's just say I'm very interested." He shrugged. "They don't ask for a specific room. They take whatever's available." I paused, then placed another 20 on the counter. "Let's say I choose the room next time. Which one will be available on Monday?" He gave me a long look, grinning like he enjoyed the game. "You got it. I'm working Monday." "Great. Let's agree on that then." "See you Monday," he said, like a snake offering a handshake. On the way home, I couldn't help thinking it had all been too easy. I'm not an expert in technology, but I know enough to handle basic electronics. I drove to the nearest electronics store and picked up a small security camera with a built-in recording device. I was surprised by how compact and advanced these gadgets have become. The salesperson showed me a few models, and we chose the one best suited for my needs. He explained how to install it and how to position it for optimal results. With my wife's car in mind, I also purchased a second GPS unit, just in case. Out in the parking lot, I called my supervisor and requested Monday off and possibly 2 additional days the following week. He checked the schedule and told me that all the days were available except Friday. I thanked him and hung up. That weekend, I stayed busy. The first thing I did Saturday morning was go grocery shopping. I bought several bags full of essentials and dropped them off at Vinica's house. Richard, my son, had a school event that day. It was Saturday afternoon, and since Richard had plans that evening, I asked Victoria to come with me on Sunday. Leslie cooked a roast, and she and I went to church that morning. The children no longer attend with us. We had agreed that the foundation they received was enough, and in time, they would find their own way. That Saturday night, Richard went out on a date, and we dropped Victoria off at a friend's house for a sleepover. For the first time in a while, the house was just for Leslie and me. I showered, shaved, put on a clean t-shirt and boxers, lit a fire in the wood stove, and settled onto the couch. It seemed Leslie had similar plans for a quiet evening. First, I heard the water running. She was taking a shower. Then she moved into the bedroom. Our house had 4 bedrooms on the second floor. Each room opened onto a shared balcony that overlooked the living room. From the outside, the house looked impressive, but it was difficult to heat. Much of the warmth was lost to the vaulted ceilings, and the first floor always stayed a little cold. From my spot on the couch, I could see the door to our bedroom. About 20 minutes later, Leslie stepped out. She was wearing dark blue, long-sleeved cotton pajamas. Her hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and even in the soft glow of the firelight, I could see she had put on a touch of makeup and her new sparkly earrings. She looked beautiful. She moved gracefully along the second-floor balcony and started down the stairs. With each step, her posture and expression reflected quiet confidence. She was 41, but still carried herself with elegance and strength. She walked across the living room and sat down beside me on the sofa. A light, pleasant scent, new perfume, perhaps, lingered in the air around her. She smelled wonderful. Our lips met in a gentle kiss. Then, the doorbell rang. I leaned back and muttered, "Seriously? Who could that be?" Leslie sighed, annoyed. "Go see who it is and send them away." Reluctantly, I got up, walked to the door, and opened it. Standing on the porch was an irritated Vinica. At her feet was the box of groceries I had left for her earlier. In a firm but polite tone, she said, "Thank you, but I can't accept this." I opened the door a little wider. "Come on, Vinica. These are for you." From the living room, Leslie's voice called out, "Who is it, dear?" I responded loudly, "It's Vinica, the neighbor." Leslie heard and raised her voice, sharper now. "What does she want?" "Send her away." I turned back to Vinica. "Please, it's just some groceries. I know things have been difficult." She nudged the box with her foot. "No, thank you, Francis. I don't want charity." Leslie's voice came again from the living room, more irritated. "What does she want?" "Get rid of her." Vinica clearly heard that. She turned to leave, but I stopped her gently by placing a hand on her shoulder. "Please, just this once, Vinica." By now, Leslie had come to the door. She looked down at the box and asked, "What is this?" I turned to my wife. "I visited Vinica the other day. I just wanted to help." But Leslie cut me off, her tone rising. "Why are you buying groceries for her? Are you still emotionally involved with her?" By then, Vinica had already walked away, down the steps and into the night. I turned to Leslie. "Leslie, come on. She's been going through a really tough time since her husband passed." I was only trying to... Leslie interrupted again, angrier now. "Oh, you were just trying to help? Think again." With that, she turned sharply and marched back into the house, up the stairs, and slammed the bedroom door behind her. The sound echoed through the house. It probably could have been heard in Cumberland. I stood there for a moment, staring at the closed door. So much for our quiet evening together. I glanced around the living room, and for the first time in a while, my mind drifted to the past. I had grown up almost across the street from where Vinica now lived. The log house we lived in now wasn't originally mine. My parents built it back in the late 1970s. My father worked for the railroad, and my mother was a dental hygienist. They earned a solid living. When Richard was born, my parents decided the house was too big for just the two of them. They moved into a smaller Cape Cod-style home closer to town. They didn't sell the house to us, but they let us live in it, rent-free. And that's how we ended up here. That weekend, which had promised peace and reconnection, ended in silence. That night, I slept in Victoria's room. The next morning, Sunday, Leslie and I went to church. And although it might have seemed unreasonable, I still understood something important. Leslie had always been a little jealous of Vinica. In fact, if I really thought about it, Leslie had always struggled with jealousy in many forms. On Monday, I went to Martinsburg with the equipment. Along with the receptionist, we selected a room that he said Leslie would be able to use. I installed a camera and an audio recording device. The manager assured me he would try to keep the room unoccupied during the weekdays, explaining that it would not be a problem. After that, I returned home. On Monday evening, we had dinner together again. Leslie made fried eggs, pancakes, and scrapple. She seemed to have fully recovered from her outburst. Richard, as usual, was immersed in his own affairs, and Victoria, well, she was just being herself. Anyone who has a teenage daughter understands what I mean. Even the sweetest girl can send the unmistakable message, "Don't talk to me." At that point, it's best to just leave her alone. No one in the house knew that I had taken Monday off. On Tuesday morning, I went into work but did not stay long. At around 9 a.m., I checked the GPS tracker that I had installed in Leslie's car. Yes, she was on the move. I went to my supervisor and informed him that I needed to take the rest of the day off. I assured him it would be the last time, and he agreed. My destination was Martinsburg. It didn't take long to get there. I arrived at the Motel 6 just minutes after Leslie. Her car was already in the parking lot, along with that same black Lexus. I remained in my vehicle and watched as Leslie and a man walked out of the motel office and entered the very room I had prepared with surveillance equipment. I activated the recording device, waited a few minutes, and then stepped out of my car. I approached the Lexus, intending to install a GPS tracker in its fuel compartment. However, the alarm suddenly went off. I cursed under my breath. I had always disliked working with car alarms. I immediately ducked behind a trash bin near the motel, heart pounding. Fortunately, the man came out, inspected the car, and then went back inside. I assumed he had disarmed the alarm. I made another attempt. This time, I succeeded. I knelt beside the passenger side and carefully inserted the tracker between the front wheel well and the undercarriage. There was a risk that it might fall off as soon as he drove away, but I reasoned that I could always follow them manually if that happened. I returned to my Jeep, drove down a side street, away from the direction Leslie was likely to take, and parked. Then, I waited, and waited. Of course, I was not inexperienced in this sort of work. There were many occasions when I had found myself far from any facilities, and on this day, I had to relieve myself. I came prepared. I used a portable urinal, sealed it, and placed it carefully behind my seat. A little after 1 p.m., the man came out first, followed shortly by Leslie. This gave me a clear view of him. He was physically imposing. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. He had to be at least 6 feet 4 inches tall, with blonde hair, and even from a distance, I could tell he looked like a model or actor. His suit appeared to be tailor-made and probably cost over $1,000. And Leslie, she was wearing a dress I had never seen before. It was deep black and shimmered as she walked. Looking at him, then at her, I felt insignificant in a way I never had before. I thought about Leslie, where she came from, her upbringing. She had studied at one of the most prestigious private schools in Baltimore. She grew up in an affluent neighborhood in North Baltimore where wealth, social status, and family connections were the norm. She was a debutante. She did not attend a public university. Instead, she graduated from a small, elite private college near the city. My background was nothing like hers. I grew up in modest conditions. I vacationed at Deep Creek Lake and swam at Myrtle Beach. Leslie traveled to Hawaii, St. Tropez, and Switzerland. I bought my clothes at Walmart. Everything Leslie wore was custom-made. I had seen it with my own eyes. All in all, I suppose I should feel lucky that we were together for 20 years. It was not a bad run. She was probably just tired of my flannel shirts and denim jeans. I could not blame her. I simply did not measure up. After they left, I approached the motel office, retrieved the key, and went into the room. I collected the video and audio devices without even checking the recordings. I already knew. It had everything I needed. I checked the GPS tracker on the wealthy man's car. It was still in place. I thought, forget it. Let's just follow him and see where he goes. So I did. This time, he didn't head to another budget motel. Instead, he went straight to the Hampton Inn. Of course, why would he go anywhere else? Based on my assumptions, they were old acquaintances. They had reconnected. She liked what she saw, and now she was making plans. I had read that there are different types of extramarital affairs, and one of them is known as a divorce affair. I had a growing feeling that this was exactly what we were heading toward. The entire situation left me feeling defeated, utterly depressed. How could I possibly compete with someone like him? Who was I, really? I felt like a nobody. Just a man in a faded green jacket, laced-up boots, and a silly hat, more like a scarecrow than a husband. I spent my time keeping drunken hunters off private land, dealing with overly aggressive wildlife, and pulling careless kayakers out of icy rivers. Meanwhile, this man probably owned a private jet, a luxury yacht, and maybe even a penthouse near Central Park in New York City. How could I ever compare? While I was flying kites, he was probably skydiving. I owned 2 boats. One was a 17-foot aluminum canoe, and the other a small motorboat I occasionally raced on the Potomac during hot summer days. Not exactly impressive. I also had 2 weatherproof cabins in the woods, one for birdwatchers, the other for hunters. That was the extent of my personal luxury. When you think about it, about her background, her resources, her social connections, It made me wonder why she married me in the first place. Perhaps it was just the result of an argument or a moment of rebellion. Eventually, I stopped trying to find out who the man was. I gathered my surveillance equipment and began the drive back home. I was finished, exhausted, defeated, but something changed the closer I got to the house. My emotions shifted. Anger began to replace despair. Thoughts spun through my mind like a storm. She married me. We had 2 children together. We built a life, a family, a home. We stood in a church and made promises that were supposed to mean something. I might not have been anyone special, but I had values. She gave her word, she swore it. And now? I wasn't weak. I wasn't a coward. It was people like me, ordinary people, who stood up to the British in 1775. Men like me who fought at Bastogne, the Alamo, Belleauwood. And what she was doing now, it was wrong. I had rights, and I was going to stand up for them. I made a vow to myself. I would not let this go. I would see it through. I had proof, real proof, and I intended to use it. I was going to start that very day. When I got home, the children were already there, but Leslie had not yet arrived. I went inside and made a pot of coffee. About 10 minutes later, a car pulled into the driveway. Leslie stepped out, but it wasn't her vehicle. I stepped out onto the porch. What happened? I asked. Where's your car? Are you all right? Leslie approached with a strange look on her face, then kissed me on the cheek. Oh, it's just some electrical issue, she said. I left it at the dealership. They looked it over while I waited and said there was something wrong with the GPS unit you installed. They removed it and said they'll be replacing it. That caught me off guard. She glanced at the front door. Did you make coffee? I'd love a cup. What's for dinner? I was fuming inside, barely able to contain it. Come inside, I said. We need to talk. She smiled, calm and unbothered. Of course, honey. But can I shower and change first? This dress is suffocating. I need to put on my flannel pajamas. As she walked upstairs, I realized it was a deliberate move, a subtle attack. It didn't even occur to me to ask where she got that expensive dress or why she was wearing it in the middle of the day. But that was fine. I would remember everything later. I returned inside. When she came down, I turned to the kids. Without a word, I pulled 2 $20 bills from my wallet and handed them to Richard. You and Victoria go out for a few hours. He smirked, took the money, and led his sister out the door. That irritated me. We had invested time and money trying to help her return to emotional balance, and I didn't like seeing her older brother treat her like that. But I said nothing. I just wanted the house to ourselves. Leslie returned, now wearing a long flannel nightgown and fuzzy slippers. So, she said, what happened? Sit down, I replied. I need to show you something. I took out the flash drive that held the surveillance footage and inserted it into my laptop. I hadn't checked it yet, but I was confident it contained the evidence I needed. I powered up the device. And then nothing. The screen was blank. I stared at it in disbelief. There was nothing on the drive. I cursed under my breath. The man at the electronics store had promised it would work. I knew I should have bought a newer model. Leslie sat comfortably, sipping her coffee. I'm waiting, she said calmly. I kept fiddling with the device, but nothing happened. Come on. I muttered. Nothing. Frustrated, I pulled out the audio recorder and turned it on. Still nothing. I glanced over at my wife. She knew. I had never seen such a smug expression on her face. She smiled confidently. You know what was on that device, I said quietly. She made the familiar innocent face she had perfected over the years. She fluttered her eyelashes and softly purred. No, sweetheart. I really don't. You do know, I insisted. I know where you were today. I know exactly what you did. She kept smiling, calm and unreadable. Her head tilted slightly. She raised her index finger to her lips and gently touched it with her tongue, eyelids heavy as if she were half asleep. Do you? I can't imagine. She whispered. I couldn't take it anymore. My anger flared. Listen, I snapped. You were in Martinsburg. With some old acquaintance. At a Motel 6. I know what you did. And where did you even get that dress? She didn't flinch. It was like yelling into the wind. That same confident smile stayed on her lips, as if none of this mattered. She purred. Darling, where in the world are you getting these ideas? I just went for a drive. I love being out in the car, even in winter. The scenery is beautiful this time of year. She sipped her coffee. You know what I enjoy the most? Looking through the bare trees and seeing those old, abandoned houses. Dilapidated little shacks where families used to live. It sparks my imagination. Makes me think of the stories in those places. Reminds me of old songs by Loretta Lynn. Butcher Holler. That kind of thing. I even see rusted-out pickup trucks on bricks and feel nostalgic, like I'm back in old Appalachia. You know, back in the days of overalls, faded dresses, and front porch storytelling. I went to La Vale, then Cumberland. Richard's been talking about Frostburg State. It's a great college. I thought I'd stop by and see the area. And the dress? I bought it for work. I wanted to make sure it fit well in case we decided to go somewhere nice this weekend. It was nonsense. Beautifully told, vividly painted, but still nonsense. I knew where she had been. I knew what she had done. And she knew that I knew. They must have found the surveillance device. Wiped everything. She was clever. Calculated. Her words were sweet, but they were soaked in venom and a quiet, selfish cruelty. This wasn't the woman I married. It was someone else, someone I didn't recognize. I felt like I was burning up inside. I cannot believe you expect me to accept this fairy tale, I said, struggling to stay calm. I saw you. I saw you enter that room. I saw you leave. Leslie, you're being unfaithful. You've broken our vows. You betrayed everything we built. I sank lower in my seat. I give up. I can't compete with someone like him. But Leslie just sat there, smiling, raising her pinky finger while sipping her coffee like some refined aristocrat. She had become her mother, a woman I had always found insufferable, living in a vine-covered mansion in Baltimore with her distinguished second husband. What happened to the woman I loved? What happened to Thanksgiving warmth and family and everything we once shared? Then, gently, she chided me, like a cat toying with a mouse. Francis, you're overworked. You're imagining things. She stood up and began walking toward me with a slow, almost theatrical sway in her hips. She placed her hands on my collar, stroked my neck, my chin, my ears. And like a traitor, my body began to respond. I tried to speak. Leslie, are you? But she silenced me with a kiss. You taste so good, she whispered. No. I pulled away sharply. Leslie looked stunned. Francis. She began. No, I won't do this, I said firmly. You won't pull me back in. I won't let myself be a part of something I can't trust. You will not, I said firmly. I am telling you, you will not. I could barely resist giving in. If only a few more seconds had passed, I would have already been there, humiliatingly submitting. I turned around and ran toward the door. I grabbed my keys and rushed out of the house. God, she almost won. Leslie ran after me, shouting, Francis, no, come back. You were wrong. I jumped into the Jeep and sped away. I needed to leave. I needed to cool down. I urgently needed to find a place where I could calm myself. I drove deep into the forest, jumped out of the car, and took refuge in one of the hunting lodges. I stayed there until I poured out all my anger and humiliation. Much of our life together had been unusual, and it often centered around Leslie, not me. When we first got married, I lost count of how many times I came home tired and exhausted, only to find her waiting for me. She set up ambushes. If only people knew then. If only people knew what she put me through. Leslie was always the initiator. She had her own collection of devices, blindfolds, handcuffs, collars, shackles. But she did not use them on herself. No, they were intended for me. Deep down, I hated it. But on the outside, I played by her rules. People would never believe the humiliating things she made me endure. I would come home completely exhausted. The children were small and usually already asleep. I tried to be prepared, but it never helped. It was like an old suspense movie I once watched late at night. Suddenly, she would attack, knocking me down. Before I knew it, I would find myself on my back, handcuffed to a table or a sofa. She forced me to please her, and she would not let me go until she was absolutely satisfied and exhausted. Sometimes it lasted for hours. After a few years, I realized I had to stop this. One afternoon, when she came home from school, she was still working there at the time. She went looking for her treasure box, as she called it. But she came back empty-handed. Honey, I cannot find my things, she said. I replied, yes, I threw them away. She exploded. She was beside herself with rage. She screamed and shouted and began throwing things. She called me all kinds of names. She rushed at me. Leslie had always been strong, almost as strong as me. Besides, she did not care how hard she hit or how heavy the object she threw was. I tried not to be rude because of this. She always had the upper hand. But that day, I had to stand up for myself. That day, everything changed. Leslie was furious, uncontrollable, a real whirlwind of emotion. I could not seem to find a way to hope. However, at some point, something inside me clicked. This was one of those rare moments when my inner voice overcame doubt and hesitation. I gathered all my strength and determination to put an end to the chaos. When her storm of emotions reached its peak, I firmly, but without unnecessary force, took control. This was the decisive moment. I did not give in to her provocations. I did not give an inch. I made it clear that from now on, our relationship would be built on a new level of understanding. Leslie felt it. She still tried to resist, but gradually her resistance gave way to something else, as if she had finally recognized my strength and confidence. That moment became a turning point for us. For the first time in my life, I felt completely in control of the situation. Leslie was no longer stubborn. Her energy transformed, and soon the tension between us gave way to harmony. It was like the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. Everything that had once seemed complicated and impossible suddenly became clear and simple. From that day on, a completely new understanding arose between us. Leslie was no longer the one trying to control me or our relationship. Instead, we found a balance where I could finally emerge as a true leader in our life together. This was the beginning of a completely different life, one filled with trust, respect, and inner strength that united us instead of dividing us. So, I sat in my Jeep and thought about my wife, about our happy times, our exciting times, and how she threw it all away without even admitting it. She did not admit to anything, although she knew that I completely protected her. I had caught her in the act, in cold blood. What was I going to do then? I took a long drive. The only thing I could think about was going home and trying to sort out the situation. I had to make her admit what she had done. If I succeeded, maybe we could move on. I assumed that one day she would leave me. While I was driving around, I tried to figure out what we owned. It was not that much. 2 pickups, 2 cars, her new Avalon, and my old Jeep. We had some furniture, my 43B, maybe $15,000 in the bank, and an empty lot on a back road where we thought we would build our own things someday. I guess that was the end of it. Everything else was tied to the children. We did not live in a no-fault state. I learned about this from a friend, but divorce could still be fairly painless. It just took longer. Did I want a divorce? I suppose I should have done it. I mean, if I were a man, should I not have kicked her to the curb? I wondered how I could kick her to the curb when she would not even admit that she deserved it. I had to find a way to get a confession out of her, that was it. Get her to acknowledge it, and then do what I had to do. I collected my thoughts and nerves and drove back home. When I returned, the children were in the living room. Leslie had returned to her private place. Most of the first floor was given over to the family, but Leslie and I had our own small closets. They were both about 10 by 10 feet. Leslie used hers for sewing and such. Mine was filled with junk, mostly stuffed animals and deer heads, things I had hunted. Richard saw me first. "Dad, Mom is not doing well. Did you two have a fight?" "Not really a fight," I said. "More like we are trying to figure out what your mom has been up to over the past few weeks. She just does not want to admit it." Victoria looked at me reproachfully. "You were not rude to her, were you?" "No, honey," I answered. "But you both told me how you suspected something." I watched in amazement as they both looked at each other. Richard spoke first. "I did not say anything like that." Victoria chimed in. "Me too. Everything was fine with Mom, at least until you." "What the heck?" I thought. I said, "Hey, you both told me your mom was up to something." I looked at them, thinking, damn it, I thought she had already influenced them. How could she do it so quickly? I added, "You told me your mother was cheating on me." Victoria stared at me. "Mother? Are you crazy?" Richard added, "Dad, you better get your head straight. Mom is here, and she thinks she wants to leave us." "Us," I thought. And he said, "Us." This strikes again. Now they were all against me. Lord Jesus. I smiled. Perhaps I should go talk to your mother. I headed toward her sewing corner. When I entered, I saw her. She was sitting in an old rocking chair that her mother had once given us. The chair was considered an antique. She looked out the window at the trees, swaying back and forth. I walked up and put my hand on her shoulder. "Do you want to tell me now?" She raised her head. Oh, that false expression of sincerity, the innocent and charming smile, the soft gaze of 2 big eyes on a beautiful heart-shaped face. Hoop earrings swayed gently beneath her delicate earlobes. "Sorry," she said. "I wish I knew what I did." I knelt down in front of her. "Honey, you know what you did. I saw you. You were cheating on me." She burst into tears. "Oh, Francis, how could you say that? You know I love you. I would never do that." I replied angrily, damn it, I know what I saw. She took out a handkerchief, blew her nose, and dried her eyes. It cannot be me. It must be someone else, Leslie, I said. Why do you not just confess? Admit it, and we will figure things out. She blew her nose again into the handkerchief and looked at me with her heartbreaking eyes. You are only doing this to hurt me. You want to leave me. This is because of Vinica, right? Damn it, Leslie. No, it is not because of Vinica. I never. Then it is someone else, right? Who is it, Francis? I will try to understand if you need it. I will not stop you. I will understand. Leslie, please do not try to turn everything upside down. It is you, not me. She jumped up and ran out of the room. I heard her crying as she walked upstairs to her bedroom. I followed her. Richard and Victoria were waiting for me. Victoria spoke first. Mom loves you, Dad. I do not understand how you could do this to her, to us. Richard added, you always said that a man's duty is to be devoted to his family. Why are you doing this? I raised my hands. I am not doing anything. This is your mother. Both my children stood up and stood in front of me. Somehow, she had convinced them to believe that I was the culprit and not her. I froze and stood motionless. I looked closely at my children. I understood the expressions on their faces said it all. Mom really tried to manipulate them, but I saw the truth. They knew their mother was to blame. I felt it, but they wanted to save the family. They were afraid of a breakup. I could not blame them. We had all seen what this had done in other families. My children were afraid and wanted me to find a way to fix everything. Damn her betrayal, it now fell on my shoulders. The next few weeks were a quiet, cold war. Leslie avoided me like the plague. My children refused to talk to me when their mother was around. Dinners were the hardest. Leslie cooked all my favorite dishes but did not say a word. If she tried to communicate, it was only with Richard and Victoria. If it had been just that, time might have healed everything or at least dulled my anger. But that was not all. Leslie had more moves than a chessboard. Somehow, our marital problems became public knowledge. All our neighbors, my work colleagues, even my boss, took Leslie's side. I became an evil idiot, guilty of emotional violence, a monster trying to destroy a happy family, a two-faced scoundrel who would not stop until he got his way. Damn it, it was not me. Leslie was in her element. She was already a beautiful woman, but from the day we argued in her sewing room, she gave it her all. I believe every man has his own weaknesses, his own secret fetishes. I always thought Leslie looked especially cute when she was all sassy and flirty. I always liked the image of a lively and cheerful student. Well, Leslie proceeded to play it out to the fullest. Flat sandals, white socks, knee socks, short plaid skirts, elegant blouses with round collars, woolen cardigans fastened only with the top button. What about the hair? Hair in ponytails, cornrows, barrettes. She even cut her hair at the front to create bangs. In the makeup, pretty Venus disappeared. Instead, delicate eyeshadow, pale pink lipstick with a slight shine, blush on the cheeks. She even changed the tone of her voice, making it softer and higher. My 40-year-old wife had turned into every student's dream, and it was not funny at all. I did not dare approach her, but she approached me. At dinner, she would get very close. In the evening, when we were watching television, she would rub herself against me. She played with me. I was watching television when she brought me a plate of sweets and bent over so that I would certainly see her breasts. She wiggled those gorgeous curves slightly in front of my eyes, took the candy, put it in her mouth, pouted her beautiful lips, batted those big round eyes, all so innocent and lovely, and then circled around me, asking, "Do you want some candy?" I spent many sleepless nights on the couch, trying to keep myself from giving in to temptation. Hey, I was a grown man. Grown men do struggle with self-control. I should not do this. God, how I hated her. Finally, one day, everything came to a head. I was home for maybe an hour. The children were in their rooms. It was almost time for dinner. Leslie left our bedroom and went downstairs with her travel bag. She came up to me and stood right in front of me. "Francis, I'm going to visit my parents for a while." I stared at her. That was all. She had made her decision. She was finally going to leave me. I did not check her phone or try to follow her. She must have been seeing the man in the black Lexus all this time, and it looked like they had made a decision. I think I swallowed hard. So, this is goodbye. She took a deep breath, too deep, I thought, and muttered, "I need Mom and Dad. I need to go home. Call me if you need anything, if you want me to come back." Her eyes filled with tears. "I love you, Francis." I heard movement on the balcony and looked up. My children were standing there. The looks they gave Leslie made my blood run cold. I was right. They knew. I did not know what to do, but I realized this was the end. I did not even get up. Why? I told Leslie, "Call me when you get there." She sniffled, picked up her bag, and walked out the door. I thought she was leaving my life forever. I wanted to cry. I really needed to cry. I was losing the one and only great love of my life. I had failed. Was I an idiot? I should have realized this sooner. So Leslie left. She took her small travel bag, her purse, and her car keys and drove off, not into the sunset, but just to Baltimore. I received the news as soon as she arrived. Her mother called me. "Francis, what happened?" "Leslie is here, and she is crying nonstop." What could I say? "You know, Mrs. Wells, I do not even know what to say. Leslie has been having problems lately. She said she needed to be with you for a while." Mrs. Wells replied, "You were nice to her. I know. Come on, Mrs. Wells, you know how I feel about her." The Wells family was respected throughout the state of Maryland. Landowners, of course. They were not celebrities on the level of the Ark and Dove ships, but they were known. They were old money and an icon of the sophisticated, traditional, and dare I say, a little prudish Maryland society. In 1814, one of the Wells family, Daniel Wells, along with another young man named Thomas McComas, shot and killed General Robert Ross, the British commander of the invading army east of Old Baltimore. They say there is a monument in town dedicated to these two young men, down on Broadway. Leslie and I got married in Baltimore at the Cathedral of Mary, Queen of the World. This is one of the main attractions of Baltimore and all of Maryland. There is one urban legend associated with this cathedral. In 1904, a terrible fire engulfed large parts of the city. Countless city blocks burned to the ground. The fire seemed unstoppable and was moving toward an old general store owned by a man named Thomas O'Neill. They say he knelt down and prayed that if the fire spared his store, he would bequeath his fortune to the church. They say just as the flames began to approach the south side of his store, the wind changed, and the store was saved. In gratitude, he bequeathed money that was used for the construction of the cathedral. It was there that we got married. I am a Presbyterian. When we moved to Western Maryland, Leslie agreed to attend my parents' church. She did not change her faith, and I am pretty sure that one day, if we had stayed married, I would have converted to hers. For Leslie, this was quite a big concession, I think. It does not matter now. The next few weeks were terrible. I have never been so depressed. We survived Lent, Palm Sunday, and Easter without her. I knew. I just knew that Leslie was planning to file for divorce. No one called from Baltimore. I assumed she had rekindled her relationship with the man in the black Lexus. I thought she had already managed to go to Europe and come back. Her parents were rich, and I just lived day by day. My children avoided me, not because they were angry, but because their hearts were broken. Sometimes Victoria would find me and just curl up in my arms. I laughed a couple of times. Richard patted me on the shoulder and nodded silently. I think they talked to Mom, but they did not tell me anything. It was not very fair. After all, it was partly what they said that initially aroused my suspicions, and then they acted like they had not said anything. I understood them, but it was still wrong. The only person who still showed interest in me was Thin Vinica from the next street. She started coming to see me. Vinica took over the duties that Leslie had previously performed. She cleaned and ironed my clothes and prepared food. She was a good cook. She cleaned, made the beds, and sometimes in the evening, she let her daughter stay up, and we all watched television together. I really liked her daughter Tammy. She reminded me of Victoria at her age. I was so lonely, and the only person who cared about me was Vinica. I think this led to something. Nothing serious happened, but it almost did. Vinica and I were watching television. Her little daughter was upstairs sleeping with my Victoria. Richard was not at home. Vinica decided that I needed a back massage. This was what Leslie used to do. I admit, I was tired and overwhelmed. Spring had brought chaos. People do not understand that one can drown in even 6 inches of water. This happens all the time. Rivers have a constant flow, even if it is only 5 miles per hour. A person falling backwards into the water can get their foot stuck between the rocks. If they try to get up, they will fall again and end up underwater where they will not have an inch of air left. I tell people all the time that if you fall out of a canoe or boat, do not try to get up. Just let the current carry you to shore. It is fun, easy, and much safer. There are also low waterfalls called dams. I warn people, do not try to swim over them. Swim to the shore and move the boat around. If they try to cross the dam and capsize, they could be sucked into what I call the whirlpool of death. The water will spin, and the person will not be able to get out. They will be thrown to the surface again and again for exactly split seconds so that there is not enough air. Eventually, they will drown. This happens every year. I was exhausted, and Vinica began to massage my back. One thing led to another, and we ended up lying side by side on the couch, hugging and kissing. I was not trying to achieve anything. In fact, I kept thinking about how much I missed Leslie. We held each other and hugged for about 10 minutes until I came to my senses. I sat up and said, "We cannot do this." She wiped her lips and said, "You are right, Francis. Sorry." We spent the rest of the evening sitting in different corners of the sofa, silently pretending to watch television. I was so glad that the children did not see us. It would have looked extremely suspicious. I felt guilty about the incident with Vinica. It occurred on Thursday evening. Leslie called me on Saturday. How surprised I was. I picked up the phone and saw her calling. Hearing her voice, my heart jumped. I said, "Yes? Is that you, Leslie?" She replied, "It is me, Francis. I have decided to return home." I was overjoyed. I almost forgot why we had problems. The thought of saying something sarcastic flashed through my mind, but I restrained myself. I said, "I think it is a good idea." She replied, "Yes. I think it is time for us to talk. We need to clarify the situation." How excited I was. She sounded so calm and happy, like the old Leslie. She was going to come home. She was going to confess everything. I was almost ready to forgive her. Almost. She said that she would come home the next day, Sunday. Saturday night and all Sunday morning, I thought about how I was going to listen to her. I promised myself I would be fair. I would not rush to conclusions. I would let her tell me everything. I decided that if she sincerely repented, I would think about forgiveness. Of course, it would take time to adapt, a kind of trial period. Yes, I would listen. I would be objective. Maybe we could make things work out. She arrived a little after 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. It was the Sunday after Easter. She waited outside until I opened the door to let her in. I thought how modestly, how repentantly she was waiting for permission to enter. I had already sent the children to my parents, so we had the whole Sunday to ourselves. I let her in, took her coat, purse, and scarf, and walked her to the sofa. She wore a turquoise halter dress with a high waist. The hem reached just above her knees, very modest, I thought. She styled her hair in a French bun. I thought she looked beautiful, very understated. She did not wear much makeup, but what she did wear highlighted her natural beauty. She was wearing 2-inch heels, so she would still be taller than me if I decided to go out later. The light-colored socks matched the dress perfectly, and the pale shade of her beige shoes complemented the entire outfit flawlessly. She looked like someone who was remorseful and ready to confess. But, oh my God, she looked radiant. I was pleased, or maybe not entirely. I sat down next to her. I was dressed casually in a pair of khaki pants and a light blue button-down shirt. I felt relaxed and, for the first time in a long time, in control. I smiled at her. "Well, what do you want to say?" She responded with a sweet smile. "Can I look at your laptop for a minute?" I felt generous. Maybe she had prepared her confession in advance and wrote it down. "I want to get my laptop." "Here you go, honey," I said. She accepted the computer, put it on the table, ran across the room to her purse, took out a flash drive, and returned. She smiled again. "I am a little nervous," she said. I responded with a smile. "It is okay, honey. I understand." She opened the laptop, turned it on, and after it loaded, inserted the flash drive. She smiled again. "It will only take a minute." I waited. The laptop was working. She used her fingertips to open the corresponding drive. Playback started. What I saw was a somewhat darkened scene. Vinica and I were lying on our sofa. We kissed. Leslie smiled softly and asked, "Do you have something you want to tell me?" To be honest, I was a little embarrassed. I asked, "Where did this come from? Where did you get this?" She was no longer smiling. Obviously, it happened in this house, my house. It looked like it happened on this couch. And it looked like Vinica and I were doing something we should not have been doing. I believe our children were upstairs. "Do you not feel a little ashamed?" She turned off the computer. "So, tell me, what do you have to say in your defense?" I was stunned. It was nothing. Nothing happened. We were there once. We felt guilty and stopped. She frowned. "Do you want to watch it again? It looks like you two were really busy. How could this happen? You had to come here to confess, to apologize to me. But, oh God, you were shining." I swore. Nothing happened, honestly. "Look again." Nothing happened. She had already put the laptop away. It does not matter. The important thing is that I was only gone for a few weeks. I felt lonely, distant, and in the short time I was gone, you started flirting with our neighbor, a woman who loves you and would do anything for you. That is pretty rude, Francis. She no longer looked happy. Not at all. Now, tell me, what do you have to say in your defense? God, Leslie, this is crazy. Where did you get this video from? She stared at me. Does it matter where the video came from? It is here. It is here. She pointed to the flash drive. You betrayed me, Francis. You betrayed my love for you. You betrayed our marriage. I jumped up. I did not do it. It was you. It was you and that man in the Lexus. This is a joke. A deception. You. She pointed to the sofa. Sit down. I sat down. First of all, there has never been a man in any Lexus. It is all in your head. Your claims that something happened in West Virginia are the figments of a confused, vague, suspicious mind. It is all in your head. I was shocked. I did not know what to answer. It is not in my head. I saw it, she screamed. Yes? Then prove it. I could not say anything. I know you have the skill to go to this motel where you claim to have seen me. I know you asked for a copy of their surveillance notes. I did not do it. No. She stated, I thought not. But I did. It is a pity. She smiled. The clerk lost them. The fog began to clear. I suspected a trick. They have a backup copy somewhere, she replied contemptuously. How do you know? I checked. Looks like the clerk has lost everything. Nothing. Nothing the whole week and the week before. Damn, I thought. Well, money. I replied, your parents must be. She tried to hit me, but I grabbed her arm before she struck. That's the end of our first part of the story, but don't worry, there will be a second part of the story soon. See you later.